Hello and good day, everyone. Welcome to Virtual Concert Hall's live channel. I'm Anna Spinskaya, I'm a pianist, and I'll be hosting today's program for you. And as always, we are here with a purpose to connect artists and audiences in live, real-time culture and music programs and news from around the globe. Throughout each season, we invite absolutely incredible people from all parts of the world to join our programs with their stories, their music, their publications, their events. People bring an incredible wealth of what's happening in the cultures and arts around the world. Members of our international jury panels, teachers, leaders of music schools, non-profit organizations, conductors of various orchestras, music managers, publishers, writers, all are our guests on these programs, and they join our debates, discussions, and presentations, all in search of how we together can make this world a better place and a more humane place through the influence of arts and culture for artists, for young people, for the future generations, and frankly, for everyone. Stay with us. Please tune to our daily programs at 12 p.m. noon Eastern Standard Time. We are on all major and social platforms. We stream onto everything you are usually people get onto. Please take advantage of the abilities of the Internet TV. It provides really unique abilities, and especially the one which is finally allowing us to enjoy two-way connection between our artists, our hosts, and you, our audience. Get involved, please. Message, comment, ask us a question. We'll bring your comments, your questions, your interactions on screen, directly on this screen. And our hosts and I myself and our guests will always respond to your questions and to your comments. We would like to connect with you directly in real time. And today's program is a deep dive for us into history, culture, family, destiny, struggles, tragedy, and of course, hope and love, as seen through the eyes of the incredible person and a book writer, Qin Sun Stubis, as she's following a journey through several generations of women in her family history, and those women who lived through China's history, actually lived as part of that China history, and they had a tremendous influence on her as a person, as a writer, as an artist. And they were the ones preceding her who will be joining us in this broadcast today.
Once there was a man whose fate was sealed, even before he was born. Once there was a beautiful, lonely woman with 3 different identities. Once there was a love like no other, in a time like no other. Once Our Lives is the remarkable true story of 4 generations of Chinese women struggling to survive war, revolution, and the seemingly unshakable power of an ancient superstition. Once Our Lives, available at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and independent bookstores.
And today I have great privilege and honor to host Qin Sun Stubis and Mark Stubis both in our studio. Qin is a newspaper columnist and writer. She composes poems, essays, short stories, original Chinese, tall tales inspired by traditional Asian themes, and she spent the past 20 years researching and writing this incredible book. And her husband, Mark Stubis, who is a pianist, Juilliard graduate, and he was a chief communication officer at the American Humane, the country's first national humane organization, and the only one dedicated to protecting both children and animals. And thank you for joining us. Welcome, Qin Sun and Mark. It's a great pleasure to have you in the studio today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
We are here today to learn from you directly about your absolutely remarkable book, which is gathering so much attention, and I'm in the middle of reading it. It's a book which has a tremendous influence on me, and it's written as a novel, but it's so filled with truth and emotion. It's an incredible read, which one can't even put down, but I have to, otherwise I get too drawn into it. So we want to learn a lot more about how and why you wrote it. So I just want to introduce the book itself. If you give me one more minute here on the screen, if you haven't had enough of me yet. So, Once Our Lives is an absolutely remarkable true story of 4 generations of Chinese women and how their lives were threatened by powerful and cruel ancient traditions, historic upheavals, gender oppression, and a man whose fate, cursed by superstitious prophecy that appears to come true, dramatically altered their destinies. The book takes the reader on an absolutely exotic journey filled with luxurious banquets, lost jewels, babies sold in opium dens, kidnapping at sea, and desperate fights for death in the desert, as seen through the eyes of your characters and your own. It's actually personal history of your own family. So this poignant epic offers an intimate look into the extraordinary lives of ordinary people living behind China's greatest historic headlines, with a narrative absolutely so incredible that had been written as fiction, people might not even believe it. So I wanted to start by asking you, Qin, please, if you can introduce the members of your family, and I will have one more question after you do this first introduction about your family members. So now to you.
Actually, interesting about my book. It's really a book of actual things that happened in my family. I decided to use their names. I decided to use just the real things because we reflected back, and I realized that these were the ordinary people, but they had such extraordinary lives that I didn't have to make up anything. But I also was worried that if I didn't write it, all those stories would be just gone along with the people. And as time went on, you really felt their presence, they disappear. But I didn't want their stories disappear. The same way as we do not want histories disappear. We write about history so that younger generations would understand what happened to the world, to a country, to the people. And nothing is better than the people that witness the real life, real history, how they lived through it. My parents, my father, I'm Chu, my mother, Yan, and they were born rich, and they went through quite a historical period of Chinese history from before the communism took over, because they were born in the 1930s, and then in the 1940s communism took over, and they were still very young. And my mother was 1932 to 1949. China was taken over by communism. That's like she was only 17 years old. And
absolutely. And if you can maybe introduce some of the, this video on screen is not showing everybody who is part of the book, but if you can also touch on, please, how they are connected within the family. And I have a question maybe afterwards. Why did you keep the real names of the people who are actually, characters in your book? A lot of times people change the names of people, of characters. But to you, if you can just tell us who the people are on these pictures.
Well, right now, to the left side corner is actually a picture of Holder with a son, young son, that he bought with gold. My uncle Chonggao. And here are some of the postcards during the Cultural Revolution, and when my father was imprisoned, to the left of the screen. And here is a picture of me to the right, and my older sister top left, and then my younger sister Ming to the top, below in the left in the photo. That's the picture to the left. And the picture on the right shows my mother, and with her some of her colleagues, was taken actually in the desert in 1957. So these are all historical pictures, and here is my father and mother. They met during, they fled Shanghai for their freedom, for their ideal lives, and they ended up together in the desert. And here is a working ID of my father's to the right, and on left is part of a postcard. And my father was born. Here are the three pictures of my father from the left to the right in the age sequence. He was born rich, but his life took a toll before he was born by a curse, by an ill fate. And so throughout his life, he really suffered, but he was always an honest man. And here are some pictures of my mother. She had three identities. When she was born, she had one name. She ended up having two mothers and three identities. The last identity she gave to herself. She named herself Yan, which is a flying swallow. She wanted to fly high like the bird, and made a life for herself. And one of the few pictures left of her, you can see to the left, with a little fuzzy hair and little old-fashioned Chinese clothes. That was before communism, as you can see, the old-fashioned way of dressed, how people, Chinese women used to dress. And my father and mother actually got engaged and married in 1957 when they were in the desert city of Zhangye, where Kublai Khan and once lived. It's like the ancient old Silk Road, and they really had a tough life together. And I wrote Once Our Lives, I chose the image of four of us sisters, my mother's four little daughters, and considered to be worthless, as the cover of the book, because I felt it symbolizes the future, the wish, how my father and mother struggled together through the greatest famine in China, killed over 30 million people, how they took flight from the Great West back to the city of Shanghai with no job, living in the shantytown, but they always had a hope, and their love was abundant. They raised us with so much love, and I wanted to show that. That's why I put a picture of the four little girls as the front page, as the cover. I actually, to address the question why I use the real names, I felt, it's a history. It's like you're writing about Genghis Khan and you try to change his name. You don't really want to. And in a way, I wanted to show people the ordinary people can just be as extraordinary. I want the history to remember who they were. I did not want to change their identity because it would become fictionalized. This is actually a true out and out non-fiction book about the real history, about ordinary people who all have names, and what they did was extraordinary things in anything but an ordinary time. So that's what my intention.
Qing, I have one question to you as a writer. You're a professional writer. You're a columnist, and you have, a lot of professional experience with writing. Reading your book, what struck me immediately is how deeply you're able to go into the emotions and visualizations and imagination, all this really true, unique and genuine response to the circumstances, and a lot of those are very dramatic circumstances you're describing, from the characters who were then and there in those circumstances, and walking down the streets and responding and feeling and thinking, imagining. How did you do that?
I think that I did before I became a writer. I probably never realized that I was gifted with some sort of a very special how I remember things. I remember them actually as pictures. I have a great memory, and it's also part of my curse. Many people told me, like, oh, couldn't you just forget about it? Whether things are good or bad, I somehow remember them as pictures. When my parents were gone about 20 years ago, I was in deep grief, and the only consolence that I had was trying to think about the life that I had with them. And I didn't realize that how I could see my life with them, that I could see them as pictures in my head, even some with colors. They were so vivid. And I think also in some ways that a lot of the stories that happened before I was born, and yet I remember them so vividly because my mother was an actress. She was trained, she graduated from Shanghai movie school, and she was she was very active. She did a lot of the plays on the stage, and she was trained in a way, self-taught by a radio. And when the radio was given to her, so she listened to all the operas and singings, and through years, she could just so readily imitate all these old classical plays. She could sing so well, and I felt that when we were little, we were dirt poor. We were so poor. I had the sticks and stones to play with, and I had the chickens as my companions. But every night when we were tucked into bed, my mother would tell us stories that were our family's past. So she would kind of tell the stories through so many nights. As I grew up, the stories became more loving and simple and exciting, to stories that started to add on the details and some scary things that happened. So through the years, I think those telling of the stories made those stories so vivid in my imagination. And I guess I was a child with imagination, so they all kind of came together. Once they were gone, when I was thinking about things, they became so vivid, so lively, so full of love and adventure and hardships, how they overcame all the hardships in life. So I felt I just wanted to, I felt that I somehow was trained already. Everything was inside me. So instead of doing research, I was more doing soul searching. I was going through my memory, and a lot of the stuffs were hard. They were so tough that I didn't want to think about them for decades. And now, because of the soul searching, they came back to me. And I felt as a part of remembering my parents, no matter how hard they were, I didn't want the pain to stop me from thinking about them. And so it was a difficult journey to write a book, but I wanted everything to come out. I wanted the history to come back to life. I wanted my readers to experience what we had experienced. So this was really a tough, long journey, but I am glad I did it, because I wanted my audience to feel the history, not just reading a history book that is very flat and full of abstract sentences, but this history that the real people experienced in real time, except I have to go back in time to really try hard to fetch them and brought them back to life.
And I was
you
struck by this
absolutely-
as well, Anna. I was really struck
Yeah.
the same as you were by the vividness, the colorfulness, the plangency of the writing. In fact, it struck me, and it has struck many readers. I noticed that critics, reviewers, and readers alike have commented how they kept forgetting in the reading of this epic that this was not fiction, because not only is it in so many ways stranger than fiction, and there's so many episodes, just as life is stranger than fiction, that truly are remarkable or stunning. But I also felt that remarkable attention to detail made you feel, whether she's talking about a banquet, a wedding banquet, or the banquet following the birth of a child, or whether she's talking about the terrible scenes of devastation in that desert town Shanghai when the Great Famine of China hit, and there were people dying in the streets. Everyone from children to young women. When she describes these scenes, it's almost as if you can smell the air, you can taste the food. And for me, the greatest thing, of course, being in the arts myself, she uses words like we use notes. The same way that when, playing with a certain tone, a certain phrasing, there could be a hesitancy, evokes the strongest of feelings, the same she does with words. And for me, it was quite a journey to follow the journey of herself and her parents as they live the ups and downs, life and death, the scenes that were in that book.
And I wanted to ask you, Mark, because you've been married for a while, and so as a couple, I'm sure that book took a very important part of the family life currently, of your today's family life. Of course, it's a history of Qing's previous family, but it has such a strong connection to today and to the future. And Mark, you were part of it, so if both of you can please reflect on how that and your family life merged together, the writing of the book. And
well, if you don't mind, I'll start. I know we
please.
have a lot to say on this, but I mean, for me, I think that sometimes you feel as many people get married, and they may have known each other for 3 months or 6 months or a year. And by the time they get married, they feel, gee, I pretty much know that person. And over time,
that's an overestimation, though.
Yeah, historically, many times, people almost get tired of hearing their spouse, recite the same stories at dinner to guests and things like this.
That's right.
This has been we've had the complete opposite situation. For me, who grew up on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, into an upper middle class family filled with the arts, but many comforts, let's say. For me, as she wrote this book and as she let me read various iterations, I was not only overcome by the stories. I mean, you're talking about stories of her mother being captured by pirates.
Exactly.
You're talking about family
And
members dying.
if you don't mind me
Yes.
interrupting, that scene is absolutely incredible, because she is. I can feel the feelings of that girl being left there with all those trunks of treasury, which she's supposed to deliver to the other side. I mean, it's a day trip, which ended up being 2 weeks in a captivity. But as she's describing her aunt putting the charcoal on her and saying, well, you're skinny, you're not going to attract attention, and then putting on herself and realizing, oh, my gold rings are going to betray me. I mean, it just comes to life like I was there. That's absolutely stunning effect of that book. But back to you, Mark, please.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, these are details that I think are thrilling to the reader. But for me, it was for me over the last 20 years as she's written this book, it really represented a kind of an unfolding, a discovery of who my wife was. Because as much as I appreciated her gentleness, her sort of brilliance in so many ways, what I didn't know were all this background, all this what we call now backstory. And it made me, as I learned these things, appreciate her more every day, and made me love her more every day. I think you could hardly fail to love someone who has been through the experiences that she has been through, and to empathize with the characters. And you feel as if, I mean, when you're talking about, even if it's a grandfather or an uncle or someone else, you put yourself in you're actually not putting yourselves in their shoes, you're wearing their shoes. You feel as if you're there. And so, again, to answer your question, I think it was a wonderful process of discovery, a journey of discovery of the woman that I had married 34 years ago, and yet every day brought some new revelation.
And
It's not
Qing,
that,
for you?
yeah. It's not that I didn't want to tell him about my past, but it was a kind of past that I had buried a long time ago. It's like the family was so low, so my mother always told us to study hard, to someday you want to be someone. Don't cook the meal, don't sweep the floor, go and read an extra book. And I felt it when I graduated from high school, and it was my great fortune, and that I ended up in a college in Shanghai, China, the second best language institute in the entire country, equivalent to like an Ivy League school called the Shanghai Institute of Foreign Languages. And so I was like only 17 years old, and I was chance to meet Shakespeare, whatever, all these wonderful classical English literature. And I was struck by Thomas Hardy, Jane Austen, and the Bronte sisters. So I just wanted to use that strength to swim upward and study hard. I lived in a dorm away from home, and then ended up getting a job as an international tour guide for the government for 7 years, doing cultural and tour guiding for the American tourists in Shanghai mostly, and I also traveled around the country. So I always suppressed my past and live more in the future tense. And then I came to America. I got more school education. I met my wonderful husband, raising a family. So it was always going upwards and not to think about the past. So when I dug deep after my parents were gone, it was filled with sorrow. Like most Americans would say, probably almost clinically depressed, and just wanted to cry. And it was really deep into the past, and so a past that I hadn't met and seen and for so many decades in a sense. So when I did it, I had one confidant, and that's my husband. I felt that I could talk to him about anything, just even if he was awestruck. He did not understand. He would ask me questions. He would listen, just lend me an ear, be my audience. And I felt that it was kind of a great helping hand to coax out the stories, because I also wanted the stories to be as objective as possible. And I wanted to have someone who would ask me questions, a man who was totally innocent of those stories. So he would also ask me more objective stories, and it would make this more history, because I didn't want it just from my perspective, who I hated, who I loved. It was not about that. And that was the reason through these 20 years, I felt that I had a lot more objective understanding about the context under which I lived. I understood about the Cultural Revolution, how I was left alone in the crib. So my parents were so desperate. They had to work, and they could have to leave an infant child in the middle of a room. And yet my grandparents and my 5 aunts and an uncle would not come from next door hearing a baby crying. I'm sure I cried, being left alone with all the needs of a baby, and nobody ever helped me. But I used to hate them, but I started to understand them more, because my grandmother did consider having 4 girls, I was the second one. Even the second was being born. They were getting a little more desperate about that, the curse that brought them all the girls, essentially ending the family name. With one more girl being born means one less chance for them to have a heir, like a one last honor and a pride for the family, for a family who went so much, struck down by war, revolution, and everything, and a curse, and to lose the last pride because our birth. And so it was a very much an understanding, and my husband was with me every part of the 20 years of journey, and how I would read to him of the little writings, of the little stories that I would tell. And he would ask me questions. He would comfort me. Some of the questions would make me probe a little bit deeper, and some of the questions would help me to see a little bit more clearer about the situation. And I could just be like almost like a ghost standing. It's like the Christmas Carol, standing as a ghost and to see what was happening. And I think that was a very important part for
Yeah,
me to
absolutely.
be objective.
This is incredible that you talk about bouncing what the story you have off someone who can be complete confident. That's amazing, because your family history brings so much of a different culture into the United States. When you came in here, I'm sure it was a big period of difficult adjustment, because and even for you as a modern woman, incorporating those deep beliefs in the curse and its effect on humans' lives, and the fate, and whether there is a power of fate, there is a power of human will, and characters in your book clearly define their destiny in many ways than one. At the same time, in their perspective, having girls being born to the family is not a blessing, but as a result of an ancient curse which happened several generations before them. So these are all really complex and entangled stories. And for me, as your devoted reader, I'm a biggest fan of your writing now. You converted me with that book. I think, I wish you would write another one. But with that anyway, I would like to get our our viewers, a little bit of a taste of your writing, because the stories behind are incredible. They were given to you by the history and by your family's history, but what you made out of those stories together with your husband and with your family, that writing itself is an absolutely incredible jewel, and it has so much texture, so much taste, so much smell, so much to feel. So I would like people to open up a page and just get a little bit of a sense of what that book actually going to carry to them when they read it.
And maybe just give a little background of what this will be.
Yes, actually, I'm gonna take from the middle of the book, because I want to. I think we were talking about the girls. We were talking about how my family treated me, being born as a girl and not as a boy, and why gender was so important at the time. And I want to read an episode about my mother giving birth to me, and how she felt from a mother's perspective, and having a daughter, and not any mother, but my mother. The entire Sun family waited nervously for the arrival of Anchu's second child, praying to the goddess of mercy, lighting incense, and hoping that this time the baby would be a boy. It had to be a boy. Anchu's brother had just had a child, and it turned out to be another worthless girl. Having too many girls meant that the family was being weighed down by yin, dark energy. The Sun family needed males to boost its strength and continue their proud lineage. They got their chance 3 months later. Yan went into labor and was admitted to the Shanghai No. 1 Maternity and Child Care Hospital. After 23 hours of labor, fate rendered its verdict, and a woman doctor presented Yan with a little bundle. Me. "Congratulations," she said. "It's a lovely little girl." The doctor was a small, middle-aged woman who looked as if she had not slept for a month, with puffy eyelids and a complexion drained pale by overwork and a tangled, messy hair. She looked more exhausted than her patient, but her eyes were kind and so was her voice. "You've got a very special baby." She was the only girl out of the 13 babies born here today. "See how white her skin is? Almost translucent. It's obvious that since this is the year of the mouse, she must be from the lucky kingdom of white mice." She reached out her right index finger and gave the baby's face a gentle brush. "Hundreds of babies I brought to this world," she went on, "but your daughter is one of only 2 that were born so white. I would be very flattered to be her godmother and see her grow up." Yan did not respond. The doctor was perplexed by Yan's silence and began to wonder if Yan had heard what she said. "Kamegu, are you all right?" Yan was not just physically tired. She was emotionally drained. Another daughter was a blow to all her hopes. She needed a boy to please her husband and get a troublesome Sun family off her back. Envisioning their reaction to the birth, she felt defeated. It wasn't that she didn't want another daughter or that she preferred boys to girls. She loved Ping and knew that she would love this little white mouse baby as well. But the boys and the women who bore them fared better in this world than girls and the luckless ranchers who kept defiantly churning them out against the wishes of their ancestors. Yan knew full well that both she and her new baby would leave the hospital in a worse position than when they entered it. The hardship of being girls would always follow them. Yan's life had told her so. If she were a boy, she could have gone to school and had a very different fate. Wealth could be confiscated, but not knowledge. She could have been a teacher, a scientist, or even a doctor. She felt sorry for her daughters and felt like apologizing for not having made them boys. She had been praying for a boy every single day since the beginning of this pregnancy, but still ended up having a girl. Why? Why couldn't she have boys like all the other women in this ward? Hadn't fate already cheated her enough? Did it have to deny her the smallest chance to make her life easier? Yan realized the doctor was still holding her baby. She looked into her puffy eyes, thanked her, and took the child. Although in old days white skin was a happy sign of high birth and easy life, Yan knew better. When Anshu was finally allowed to come in to see the baby, it took only 5 minutes for them to abandon any notion of using one of many poetic, hopeful, and furry girls' names so favored and savored in the old China. Instead, they agreed to call me by the serious-sounding name, Qing. Although in English, it looks and sounds similar to the name of the Emperor Qin first unified China and gave the infant nation its name. The character my parents picked out was anything but ambitious or noble. It was a name for a new, harder world that, like Yan, would continue to suffer the birth pains of its time. The girl, whose white skin promised ease and privilege, was instead named Diligence, because her parents knew that only through struggle, patience, and hard work would this poor mouse ever stand a chance to someday be someone.
That's an amazing passage. And it's about you, and here you are, an author of an incredible book, not only standing a chance, but commanding it, commanding your readers, commanding your audience, inviting them into this extraordinary journey of overcoming the curses and fates and prejudices and biases of your own parents. Unbelievable. And I applaud you on your journey as much as the journey of your ancestors. And I'm sure you're carrying it through to your children as well.
Thank you. Yes. I think that how my mother raised me, in a way, because my father was constantly imprisoned, I spent so much time with my mother. Often the family had 4 little girls and a mother. One of my neighbors used to say to my mother, he said, "You are one hen with 4 little chicks." And she had so much impact on my life. I witnessed how she did things for her children. So even after I came to the United States, had my own children, we were not poor anymore. I used to take apart my own sweater and made them to balls of yarn, and then knit little sweaters for my children, because that's how I remember my mother did. Even though the kids had tons of clothes and did not really need to have homemade clothes, but I really enjoyed doing these little touches, sewing little pajamas, actually hand sew pajamas for my son, for my daughter, make little dresses for my daughter. And I enjoyed using my hands and sew things together, because I remember how my mother used to do those things for us and told us always, go and read an extra book. Learn a little bit more. Tell me what you read. If you tell her the stories about things about you read, and she would just be so pleased. So in a way, she had hopes and dreams of her own life, kind of more on us. Whatever we did, we were fulfilling the life's achievements for her as well. That I did understand that.
And eventually, I think one of the things that struck me, and certainly goes to the mission of your program, is how arts and culture was the life raft that saved Qing. Because, here you have a family where the father was an honest, good man who was unfairly imprisoned by the state for speaking out against the injustices that he saw around him. A very desperate family that almost had no food. The little girls had to go out scrounging for a handful of rice each day, when they were only little tykes, and all this was going on, and it is really rather stunning to see that the journey that she made. Because why? Because of books. That her mother made sure that if they had a few small coins, she would buy the children a book. Qing studied hard in school. She was lucky enough to find an eccentric British professor who was living in Shanghai, and just out of who knows why, some whim, decided to take her under his wing and teach her English. She was able to get a borrowed radio and listen to English broadcasts. And so, as a result, she was able to get into the Shanghai Institute of Foreign Languages and make a completely new life for herself, pull herself out of a shantytown where there were no opportunities. No opportunities were offered to anyone in those situations. And here she is, and has become now a member of the culture establishment. So I'm particularly proud of her for that journey. And again, it's just showing what you seek to do here all the time with virtual concert halls, is to show that arts are not just a nice thing, they're not just a comfortable thing. They are important, they're meaningful, they're reflective of the lives we lead, and they also allow people to find a power within themselves that
Absolutely.
that changes the world.
Yeah, and Qing, you are a living, walking, talking example of the culture being an empowering force, and not only motivation, but actual events which happen in your life, which were result of your own doing, of your own connection to the arts and culture and education, is incredible. Lifting a girl from the streets scrambling for scraps of food to your life today, and your the ability of your family to share that life and give that to your children is an incredible power. And in your book, I also noticed this is something, as a cultured Russian, am very attuned to, and I love it very much. You, in the middle of a descriptive story or moment describing an event, you throw in almost like sentences which I want to turn into headlines. And you do it so with such an ease. Like in that passage, you mentioned that, well, there's always a saying that wealth and goods can be taken away from a person, but knowledge, understanding, and skills cannot. I mean, this is pieces of wisdom which. I want to turn them into a plaque and put it on the wall. And your book is peppered with that for anyone who pays a little bit of attention to the turns your speech and your writing takes. That's another remarkable part. I want to urge our viewers to get the book and immerse in that emotional and historical journey. But not only, do be on the lookout for those pearls of wisdom to carry with you, because those are the summaries of what your own doing can produce in life, how much good, how much love, how much opportunity and future you yourself bring by that transformation of your background and where you are now.
I do believe that I want this book to be about the humanity, no matter where your background is, where you're from, how old you are. Never too late to realize the true value of ourselves. And one thing is, cannot be passive. We cannot be passive if we want to wait for things to happen. If we always be on the receiver end, you cannot change your lives. I think one way of changing it is we do need to play a role in our own lives. We need to know what we want, and then just keep on working hard at it. Even the darkest moments, their sweetness, their happiness, and no matter what you are suffering from or how much you are suffering, there are positive things to anchor us. I do believe, because I'm a Chinese, that the entire world cannot be all dark. The only reason the word darkness exists is because there is a bright side on the other end. And the darkest tunnel, you can crawl out toward where the light is. And that's how we can get ourselves out. No matter it's a physical, emotional darkness, there is a determination and bravery we should instill upon us. And I think that I want my readers to see this is a testimony of will, of love. Sometimes love is not for the others. There is a self-love. And if we loathe ourselves, then there is nothing we can do. We have to love ourselves, and thinking about it's a life. Every life is so precious because we are here once walking this earth, and we're not going to be here forever. And if all forces on the surface of the world, earth, is against us, we still have we ourselves as the center to protect us. And we can do that. Find the things we would love, would enjoy doing. We're already doing much better. And I think in a sense that I was very lucky, very fortunate to have a mother who actually came from a great family, and she had seen the upper society, what life was like. And it was like she bring it down through the tunnel to tell me, like, gee, it's not so bad. If only we can get out of these horrible things, we can have a better life. And I felt that the encouragement, knowing there's a better world out there, I think it did help me to kind of almost, she was my guide. She was giving me the little shaft of light to see, here, it's up there, we have to get out and get to that, closer to that place. And I think that really helped. And I hope that with my book I will be able to be the one to have this little flashlight and show it to my readers. Hey, the world, is out there, and there is a humanity, and we can get to a better place and have a better world. And that's what I really hope, to embrace ourselves with love, and it's very important.
Yeah, this is a wonderful mission you're on, and I'm grateful that you are on it and showing the example of how you can walk along that path. We are coming to the end of our time for this program, but before we say goodbye, I was going to ask if you might want to read another passage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to, since this program is about art and how much even my mother, how she tried hard to get into the arts, and may have, by the way, saved our family with her stories, with her love, with her, how she pursued art as a woman and how hard it was. And she tried to get into the art world through the little self-training radio, as I said previously, learning the plays, learning everything, and how my grandfather thought about what was she getting into. Okay. She joined a performing art society at a time called the Dongyi Performing Art Society, so I need to point that out. Yan felt an urge to get out of the apartment and work on something more meaningful, so she went to the Dongyi Performing Arts Society to continue her career. Holder was glad to see her getting out of the stifling apartment. He even went so far as to see her performances a few times. A proud smile rose on his sad face every time she recalled his daughter standing at the center of the large stage, playing the heroine of The Great Storm, a famous play at the time. Yes, my daughter. Only a daughter from the Gu family could have done so well. But the dilemma was clear. The Gu family was a dignified one. What would the ancestors think about her being involved with the vulgar career of acting, which was almost on the level with prostitution? In the old days, the poorest families would sell their daughters to performing groups to entertain the rich. Even though the Communist Party made it clear that acting was now a respectable job, but because the actors and actresses worked for the government for the entertainment and education of the masses, being on the stage meant his daughter could be seen and admired by everyone, not just by those who loved and admired her, but also by the lusting eyes of all men. Holder could just have stopped her from performing by using blunt words or locking her in her room. But he didn't. He wasn't sure what to do, because he was torn between his wish to preserve his daughter's happiness, of which she had so little, and the wish to defend his ancestors' honor. Holder's dilemma seemed to be hopeless, as there seemed to be no middle ground for compromise. Besides, Holder wasn't the confrontational type. He would rather walk away from the problem, rather than dignifying ridiculous rumors. But this was not something Holder could walk away from. He feared that what she wanted to pursue happened to be the worst possible choice in life. However, he also sensed that if he took any action, an unpleasant argument was inevitable. Holder rarely argued with anyone, let alone with Yan. As it turned out, he was right to worry. When an argument finally broke out between the two of them, it was explosive enough to change the courses of both their lives.
Thank you so much for reading that. The dynamic in the family and the striving for one's dream and the one's own decision over the destiny, especially for women. This is so important. We all come from that heavy baggage of the heritage where our voices were not welcomed, if not to say suppressed. Incredible. Yep. And as we're coming to the end of this program, I'm hungry for more passages and I want to hear more. And I hope you write another book on that topic because you have so much richness to offer. It's incredible. And Mark, thank you very much. I'm thanking you on behalf of our viewers and all Qing's readers for being such a great support of that process, of that painful writing process and revisiting all the sorrows and difficulties from the family's past.
Thank you. I feel privileged, honored to be on your show.
Thank you both. And with this, we're going to say goodbye to Qing and Mark Stubis. And thank you for joining us for this program. I hope everyone enjoyed the program. I want to thank also our incredible team, the virtual concert halls magicians behind the scenes who create these programs for your attention. And I want to thank also everyone who joined us for this program today and in the future. Thank you very much. The supporters and our collaborators, you see on the screen, many companies and organizations from around the world are joining our effort of bringing arts, culture, and people who make a difference through arts and culture to the attention of everyone who joins our programs. We are on every major platform, social media platforms and video platforms, and you can always watch more of our programs at 12 noon. We're live, or see all of the replays of the previous programs on those various channels. And with that, I want to thank you again, Mark and Qing, for being with me. It was a great privilege to talk with you about the history of your family and the writing of this wonderful book, Once Our Lives. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye now. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.